One of the most difficult situations that you might encounter in a breakup recovery situation is figuring out how do you deal with an ex who had a family member pass away. There's a lot of things that kind of go into this. There's the situation where maybe you don't want to get them back and what the protocol is there. There's maybe the situation where you do want them back and what the protocol is there. And then there's a situation when you do have them back and what's the protocol there. So what I'd like to do today is actually kind of go through this very difficult situation and kind of give you at least some guidelines to follow. And I guess we'll start by talking a little bit about my past. So in the past, I feel, a little too rigid on this topic and sometimes even harsh and cold. But the data is what I ultimately follow, and here's what the data says. The data says it's important not to be rude to your ex. I'm bringing that up because in the past, specifically for individuals who were in the no contact rule, I would say, if their family member passed away, don't break the no contact rule, stick to it, just ignore it. And yet we've actually found that that is maybe not the best advice long term. People tend to hold a grudge, especially when someone very, very, very close to them has passed away and they almost are expecting just common decency, at least some sort of condolences, and they don't receive it from you. They hold a grudge, and usually it hampers your ability to move forward after the no contact rule. So I guess let's talk about how to handle the no contact rule. The first question you should always be asking yourself if you're in a situation you find out that your ex's family member has passed away is you should ask yourself, should you break the no contact rule? And my answer to that, I guess, is it depends. If it's someone really, really close to them, then yes, you can always break it to offer some very basic condolences, and then you can sort of go back and restart the no contact rule. I will say there is one small exception to this rule. One of the things that I've talked a lot about is how the no contact rule can lose effectiveness every single time you have to restart it. And we found that if you've restarted the no contact rule upwards of 4 to 5 times, it loses a lot of its effectiveness. So if you're in a situation where your ex has a family member that passed away, but you've broken the no contact rule 8 times in the past, I don't know if it's in your best interest to continue breaking it. But of course, that leads us to the situation where you have to break the no contact rule to offer condolences. What the heck do you say? Well, I think it's important to just kind of keep it generic. What you don't want to do is you don't want to bring your ex back into the grief. Instead, you just want to offer well wishes, give them the condolences, and then you jump right back into the no contact rule. And the reasoning here is pretty simple. You don't want to be cold. The common theme that you're going to hear me talk about throughout this discussion is acknowledge, but don't fix. I think naturally, I was actually talking to my wife about this last night when I was kind of game planning what I was going to say for this discussion. And she brought up an interesting point, and there might be some gender differences. So none of this has been fully backed up by any kind of peer-reviewed research. But she made the interesting point that women tend to be a little bit more caregiving. And so naturally, when they see someone going through a difficult time, they have a tendency to want to fix the problem. And this is actually a little backed up by our ability to understand that most of our clients tend to have anxious attachment styles. And what we found is that people with anxious attachment style tend to fall victim to codependent tendencies. And people with codependent tendencies tend to be problem solvers / controllers because they want to control the factors. And so there's a natural inclination to want to fix the problem. But it's very important that you don't try to fix that. Instead, you just acknowledge it and kind of go back into the no contact rule. But what if you aren't in the no contact rule? The rule here, in my opinion, is that you need to be the person that gets your ex's mind off of it. Once again, acknowledge it if they bring it up, but don't fix it. So the key component here is to let them lead. So wait for them to text you. So sometimes people that have had this happen really need space. And you can hurt your case by giving off like these anxious energy vibes. Like I said in the previous section, people or women specifically who have anxious attachment styles who tend to be a little codependent want to be the fixers. They want to be the white knight in shining armor. But ultimately, all they end up doing is giving off these anxious vibes. And that is the last thing someone who is grieving needs to be going through. So don't add to their stress. Instead, what you need to do is be kind of the secure rock. Be the distraction that they kind of come to when they're dealing with the grief. In fact, this is the exact advice I gave to someone on our community live stream just yesterday, actually. This person was asking how they should handle a situation where their ex's, I think, mother or father passed away. And the main point I think I kept hammering home for this individual is you need to be the person that your ex comes to when they want to get away from it all. Because not only will that raise your value, but it kind of just bring you two closer together. But once again, it's important for you to acknowledge, but don't try to fix the problem. Listen to their issues, but don't sit there and overly try to control and fix it and be the white knight in shining armor. You'll actually be the white knight in shining armor if you are the distraction that takes them away from it. Once again, like I said, I was talking to my wife about what I was going to talk about and essentially setting up the game plan rules. And she was talking about how she's noticed a lot in our community, individuals talking about their exes who have gone through this, and how one of the common themes that our clients really get upset about is the fact that they aren't the distraction that their ex goes to. In fact, their ex is actually going out with friends and sort of partying and trying to get away from the grief. And they're feeling jealous that's not them. What I always kind of think in the back of my mind when I read something like that is, well, it's probably because the ex associates them with anxious energy. And as a result of that, they want to go to someone who just kind of doesn't talk to them about it, can sort of cater to some distraction, but getting them away from their grief. But of course, then there's the situation where you're recently gotten back together. You're back together with this ex. What do you do then? Once again, acknowledge the problem, don't fix. But here's the one caveat I will say. It's important that you're a little bit more supportive. You're spending more time with them. Once again, you need to be the distraction for them. So don't bring it up. Just be there. This, I think, is going to be an important element, because what we find with people who have avoidant tendencies is they tend to have backgrounds where they had a lot of instability or were ignored a lot as a child. And so in a weird way, the death of a parent specifically can really trigger them. And if you're providing them with an environment that maybe a secure parent would have provided a child back in the day, they will naturally flock to that and like that. But the important part is you're not overcrowding them. Yes, you want to be more supportive, but there's still an element of letting them lead, giving them space when they need space, acknowledging when they bring up the simple facts that they're struggling with this, acknowledging it, but not fixing it. The tendency for a lot of people, I think, is to try to be this mini therapist, but it's important to leave that to the professionals. The best thing for you to do is just to be there.